Hello, it's Taylor and welcome back to my channel. If you are unfamiliar with what I do, I am a dating and relationship coach slash retired mental health and marriage and family therapist. I teach vetting and I'm a matchmaker. So today I wanted to talk to you all about texting. This has come up quite frequently with a lot of my male clients. It's always something that is relevant in the early phases of vetting slash dating. Whether you're a man or a woman, there's always concerns and analysis that goes on. But some of my colleagues out here who produce YouTube videos, like Coach Corey Wayne, it's funny because we have a lot of clients in common. And I really admire him and I endorse much of his material, or I just endorse him in general, and I recommend his book to clients as well. But there's something, and there's probably a few things that we don't necessarily agree on completely, which is totally fine. And this is one of them. So he suggests that you only use texting to set up the next dates, that you really avoid prolonging texting or communicating via phone other than setting up for those physical contacts. Now, I know there's a contextual relevance here, and so I want to clarify that with you, but I also just want to give you my general opinion and what I recommend that you do in the process of vetting online and digitally with your phone. So he would suggest not to prolong that communication in between physical contacts, and that is more relevant when you are in close proximity with someone that you're vetting, right? Like if you've met them organically, if they're in your general vicinity, then it's going to be a lot easier to meet them in person to establish whether there's enough curiosity, interest, and attraction there to perpetuate and escalate that connection further. But if you're not that close, then you don't want to be investing and wasting all of that time in meeting up with someone you don't even know is genuinely interested or attracted to you, or vice versa. It's a lot easier to get the initial vetting stages through the phone. And this is absolutely possible. I especially work with a lot of high value, very busy, very professional, successful men that don't have time to have a second job to be on a dating app, because I definitely don't advise that for my clients, but they also don't have time to meet people in person for that first coffee or drinks or walk in the park or whatever it is that they decide to do on a first date. They just don't want to invest that. It's a time sink for them, and it's a lot easier to do what I suggest for them. So they do like my suggestions and recommendations about how to use the phone and how to apply that online vetting strategy. So instead, I want you to think of it this way. Yes, there's going to be a little bit of a skill that you need to develop in regards to communicating. Just like communication is a skill, period, in real life. There's a skill set that needs to be like a muscle that you need to flex and work out and develop online with your texting, with your just conversing on the phone, with your video chats, and social media interaction, period, right? So think about it in regards to escalating step by step, right? Like initially, if you are meeting someone for the first time online, and when I say that, what I'm talking about is in an organic network or a community setting in social media, could be Twitter, could be Instagram. Somehow the algorithms connected you, or you have mutual friends on social media, and somehow you've gotten into each other's neighborhoods, right? And so you're able to see them on a day-to-day basis, their interactions, their comments, their posts, maybe their stories on Instagram or their viewpoints on Twitter, commenting on different relevant value systems. And it could also be Facebook communities or groups where you have similar interests, maybe hobbies or career paths, and you know that there are certain things that just are going to click well, and you have that intrigue with them. You see their picture, you feel that they're attractive, you're drawn to them, and you need to verify that. So escalating to the next step would really be, having a comment on their particular page. Once that happens multiple times, you can DM them directly and Obviously, you're going to keep it above the waist, nothing sexual. Definitely don't go overboard with your flirtatiousness or your playfulness and your teasing, but you do want to connect to something meaningful. So you want to be noticing, observing, and commenting on things that matter beyond how they look, right? And I think it's almost like you need to take for granted that you're attracted to each other or that someone's going to be attracted to you, unless you're a wreck, you know? Like if that's the case, you should already be doing a lot of work to accentuate all the other assets that you have going for you. And an average person, a homely woman, or kind of like not so attractive guy is totally viable as a high value person outside of that physical element if you're able to really work with what you have going for you. So work with wardrobe and style and presence and energy. Make sure that your temperament is really, positive and you're engaging and just generally pleasant to be around. Maybe you have some activated energy, you're doing stuff, you're driven, you're ambitious. That's more for men. And for women, you're really sweet, you're smart, you've got like a sharp mind, you've got a good sense of humor. A lot of these things are shared for both men and women, but generally speaking, you want to be able to communicate that. And if someone's spending the time to reach out to you, generally they're curious, they're interested. And if you're single, women must always assume that there is some level of interest involved in pursuing more communication. For me, as someone who has an online business, it's always been very tricky for me to navigate those initial few exchanges with people. I make it very clear that this is work-based. There's nothing personal involved in my responses and that I have boundaries. Especially now, I have a relationship, so it's very clear that I have a relationship and I assert those boundaries pretty quickly. But even when I was single, it was still something that I was able to clarify. So speaking to the women in particular, make sure that you assume someone is interested if you're single and they're taking the time to reach out to you and communicate at a deeper level and more frequently. So if you are not interested for whatever reason, make that clear. Be tactful, but make it clear so that you can kind of nip it in the bud. And anyone who is creepy or just determined to pursue despite your preferences, and be okay with not being liked or being considered mean or harsh at times. That's an appropriate time to assert yourself. And even though you're doing it tactfully, people can interpret it in a bad way. And that's life. But also for men, recognize that most women are just friendly and they're polite and they try to just sort of humor, banter, and they're not always looking for validation or titillation or attention, and they're not always hedging their bets, or they're just friendly people and they're trying to be nice. So with that being said, let's say you are both interested and this escalates to DMs. Let this go on. Don't pressurize the situation. Be outcome independent. Just make the most of it and see what naturally comes to the surface. And then you can maybe ask for a number, or there's something in particular that you want to talk about and it's kind of clunky to talk about in DMs. So it's either a phone call, and if not a phone call, a video call, because you can use those apps to do those things. You can send voice notes, but ultimately, let's say you're off the online system, you're out of the social media platforms, and you have established at least that much trust that you can be friendly with them on a personal level and reveal a little bit more about you. So in that case, now you have a connection and you're in the early phases of vetting each other. So men that I work with, and we've had a particular conversation this week that I'm also inspired by, but something that came up was about not texting outside of setting up contacts or dates, especially if you live far apart from each other. It's going to communicate disinterest if you're not accessible via text or phone call, right? And so you have to have some kind of continuity, and you have to really feel like you're connecting to someone with that outcome independence, right? Like if it seems transactional if you're only communicating if you get what you want in that sense. Yes, you want to mirror each other, you want to reflect the same level of interest and effort with each other, but it has to be a fluid thing that comes organically because of your chemistry. Just like in relationships, relationships should not, at least healthy ones, not transactional, but they should be reciprocal. You should see, relatively the same effort from both parties. It's not one person carrying the majority of the work. And that's when they're working really well, is when they have that natural ebb and flow. And this goes for friendships too, right? Not just romantic relationships. But this communication frequency in the beginning can sometimes be way overblown. And, you don't have to think so hard about when and what and how to text, except I really love working with some clients on basically how to refine their personality via text. You don't want to communicate that you're desperate or you're needy or you're insecure even. So there's a lot of things that are subcommunicated by the way that you string your sentences together. Don't write your texts like they're a formal letter or email like you would on LinkedIn, for instance. Those are two totally different things. So when you're texting someone, even if you've just met them and got their phone number, it's really important to be familiar. And when I say casual, that's what I mean by it. Just be really familiar. Act as if you would run into them in real life, right? Let's say you're at a restaurant, you're at a coffee shop, you see them. You don't walk up to them formally, say their name, remind them of you. You just sort of appear and you say something cute or funny or teasing or flirty, right? Like if you see them sitting down at the table, they're drinking their coffee, they're on their phone, they're reading a book, whatever they're doing, you can kind of politely walk up to them and maybe say something cute like, "That looks like a really interesting book. I didn't know you were a reader." Something like that. It's already assumed that they know you. And even if they don't remember your name, it puts you in a position where you're making a more friendly, personal connection. And also, it gets them feeling comfortable with you. So I want you to use the same approach in your texting as you would in real life, like that, very familiar. Obviously, you're not going to be seeing what they're doing on the other side of the phone, so you can't make a connection with a segue to that. But just act as if they're in the room with you and strike up a conversation, almost like it's mid-thought, without it being totally delusional. You just want it to have a cadence where it's not like you have to stop and start with these really choppy conversations. Just pick up where you left off or just start the conversation, and don't preface it with any kind of disclaimer or do the whole salutation thing, if that makes sense. So a lot of people get that wrong, and I think it's really helpful when you start to implement your texting more casually that way. And also some advice that I will give away for free. I do work with my clients in real life, in real time, on the phone, in the moment. They're like, "Oh my God, I just met somebody. I got their phone number. When should I text them?" Or, "I got this text. I don't know what to say. This is what I have drafted." And I will draft your texts with you. It's really not to be ghost texting. It's really just to edit yourself and learn how to communicate better so that you're not pushing people away or making unattractive comments or mannerisms that will send the wrong message. Definitely don't use ha-has or LOLs. Do use emojis sparingly, but use flirty emojis and help them accentuate the tone, since you don't have the body language in order to go on. Sometimes that cool face with the sunglasses is really helpful, or it could be a playful one, like one of the funny ones. It could be like the devil or the mask or whatever it is. It depends on your conversation. I mean, they automatically pop up as options, but have your go-tos that tend to communicate your personality a bit. You might have to have some self-awareness in order to know what your nonverbals or what your tonality really communicates first, but play with it. Definitely don't do the hearts or the kissy face with the hearts. Don't text like a female, don't use emojis like a female, but do use emojis, don't use the sexual ones. So be mindful of all those things. And ultimately, you really want to keep it simple. Less is more. Try to be concise. Don't use a lot of formal language, and do use contractions, but you don't want to sound like an idiot. So you don't have to be perfect, but make sure that you are sort of whittling it down to the point. So get to the point, be playful with it, have fun, and don't overdo it. Don't overthink it, and be yourself. Those are really some of the key takeaways that I can give you here. And that's the other thing you want to do generally is listen and be interested to someone. And I've talked about this on a video before, but even in text, that to me is the most relevant thing. Like, you don't want to be putting the walls of text up, not because it's not equal to the number of lines they've put out, but because you're talking too much and it doesn't communicate your interest, it doesn't communicate respect. It just sort of seems selfish and self-absorbed. So make sure that you are asking questions, communicating curiosity. And I do agree that you don't want to overdo the texting, especially in the early stages. But keep in mind that you do need to text or use the phone more the further away you are from each other. So not to encourage long distance relationships, but especially as I do a lot of matchmaking with people all over the world who are countries apart, they need to be able to get that connection remotely. And this is the only way that it's going to get established. So through texting, in between video calls or phone calls is absolutely encouraged, and there's no reason to feel like that's going to ruin things. You don't want to over communicate. Once you start getting into a routine quickly of talking every day, it's really going to take a lot of that intrigue and that mystery out of the equation. So you want that anticipation to build. A lot of times I talk about pacing in the vetting process. So this goes with vetting online and texting just the same. So make sure that you start slowly, do your maybe weekly phone or video calls, text a couple times here and there, and let it escalate. Leave room for it to increase and grow as you go. Now, it depends on the situation, how long you expect to be apart, but obviously you want to have that opportunity to really focus on meeting in person as soon as possible. You don't want that to linger on forever, but there can be obstacles that keep you apart, especially now. So let's say after 3 months, if this is happening online, you really want to emphasize the importance of meeting in person. So a lot of times that may be in the initial phases, it can actually be the man going to be closer to where the woman is. And I like to encourage the man to come up with some other reason for going, and then that kind of happens on the periphery, or vice versa. As long as it doesn't feel pressurized, I think that's really important. But that's not to say that you can't intentionally go to visit each other. If the intensity has really peaked, that's totally fine. So it's not like there's any real hard rules here. It's very contextual and personalized to your particular circumstances. But generally, I just want to verbalize my disagreement with the fact that texting in between physical contacts isn't valid in my vetting system, right? Because especially if you're not going to be seeing each other a lot, that the dates are going to be fewer and further between, then you're going to be using the phone more. That doesn't mean you're texting all the time, but it does mean that it's okay to get to know each other digitally and not just in person, because this is a helpful tool for you to slow things down and pace things out to really establish whether there is genuine interest and attraction. And trust me, attraction can build digitally, on the phone, and through video calls. So don't be discouraged there. Just don't overdo it, because you don't want to friend zone the person, right? If you rely on them too much too soon, then it can easily slip into that category. So you definitely want to be teasing and playful. You want to have that mystery. Keep them on their toes, keep them guessing, not in a mean way, but just in a very light and playful way, the way that it's supposed to be. It's like you want to continue to date your spouse. No matter how many years you've been married, the same thing, same philosophy from the beginning is make sure that you are playful and you're flirtatious. And that's the good part of seduction, the ethical part, right? It's not a game as in you have control and the other person is at a disadvantage. It just means that you're having fun flirting and expressing that interest and that attraction harmlessly. So get your phones out. You have permission to text that person that you're interested in. Just think outside of the box and have fun with it. Don't be boring. Don't just chit-chat endlessly. If you don't have anything meaningful to say, if you're not really enjoying the conversation, don't feel obligated to continue it, and stay busy focusing on your life, doing the things that are important to you, and don't always be available and on the other side of that phone waiting for the text. So I hope that helped today. Please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos from me, Taylor.